clean and welcome to episode 14 of the Mk1 Escort RS2000 reassembly. At the end of the last video I said I was going to be placing an order for some of the more exciting items for the car, or for the engine in particular, and that hasn't changed, although one of the main items, the most exciting item I was really looking forward to arriving, happened to be out of stock. It's going to be out of stock for the next 2 weeks. So unfortunately I can't quite let you in on that just yet or show you any footage of it. But what I will do is let you see some of the items I did manage to get. So I'll show you some of them items first, and then we'll get on with fitting some of them items, and probably a little bit of wiring in this episode. It's about time I started getting the engine loom ran in, modified to suit the car, and connected up. So we'll take it from there. So I said just before there that I'd ordered some parts, and the main part I really wanted to show you, like I said, it's not here unfortunately. It won't be here for another 2 weeks, which I'm absolutely gutted about because I was really looking forward to seeing it. But these are the parts that have came. So what we've got here is the retro Ford alternator kit, starter motor, and specific Mk1 throttle cable, which will be going with the rest of the parts that will be coming shortly. So basically this mounts onto, as you're looking at the engine from the front, this mounts on the left hand side. This mounts the alternator solid, so there's no adjustment in that alternator. The alternator is mounted solid. I'll show you it all fitted very soon and how it fits. This here, this is your adjustment. This goes on the right hand side of the engine, and basically if I spin it over you'll get to see exactly how this adjusts. So there, as you can see you've got a, see if I can get it up in the light, you've got an adjuster there. You basically put a star drive in, and if you turn that, it's like an eccentric. Basically it pushes the I'm going to call it an idler pulley. Basically I would say it's just classed as an idler pulley, but that's what puts the tension onto your auxiliary belt. Basically turn that eccentric until it puts the right amount of tension on, nip up your centre nut, nip up the centre nut on the eccentric, and that's your belt tightened up. The starter motor is specific for the retro Ford sump. It's a really small and light item. Such a compact little unit, really nice and neat. That I'm really pleased with that. So that's easily fitted. That's just a case of a couple of bolts, and obviously the throttle cable, which I'll be fitting later. It obviously came with all the bolts, and I'll explain now exactly how it all fits together, and then I'll show you it when it's all fitted. So as I said, this bracket here mounts the alternator solid onto the left hand side of the block. So as you can see down there, we've got a number of fixings in the side of the block, and this bracket basically lines up with them fixings just like that, and that's where your alternator mounts. The alternator will basically be where my hand is, so that's that bracket taken care of. I'll show you it fitted. It's just a case of putting 4 bolts in, and then you mount your alternator to this bracket. Again, very straightforward. So here we have the place where the idler pulley fits, and the bracket basically picks up on that bolt there in the top. You take that bolt out and you fit a longer one, and you'll see just behind the water pump there, the smaller bolt there that secures the water pump. You basically take out that bolt, you replace it with a countersunk bolt which fits into, if I have it the right way around that would help, as you can see there, it fits into the countersunk part of the bracket. So that section will fit in behind just there, and the countersunk bolt will fit through, and this bit levers forward and lines up with that top bolt I've just showed you there. And that's basically how that fits, and as I say, that's adjustable to give you your belt tension. So I'll get all that fitted up now. It's really straightforward. As I said, it's just a case of putting a couple of bolts in. I'll get it fitted up and I'll show you it all fitted once the belt's on and it's all tensioned up. There we have the first of the new parts bolted in place. Very simple. 3 bolts bolted up, tightened up, ready now for cables to be run in, loomed in and connected up to the solenoid, which is the main reason actually why I'm fitting the likes of the alternator and the starter motor, is so that I can then run cables to where, or to exactly where they need to be. So once I get everything in place, I can then get the loom loomed in really nice. Before I go any further, I thought this was a good opportunity just to show you how these brackets fit before I fit the alternator and water pump pulley back on, which kind of hides how they fit. So that's the, I called it an idler pulley before, but it's obviously not an idler pulley, it's a tensioner pulley you would call it, because obviously it applies tension to the belt. So that's that one fitted, just with the 2 bolts. I've put some Loctite on the bottom Allen key bolt because there's no spring washer or anything on that. And then on the other side, we've got the other retro forward bracket, which just picks up on the 4 bolts, and there's really nothing to fit in them. Beautiful fit, really nice. So let's get on now. We'll get the alternator fitted, the belt fitted, and I'll show you a basic bit of detail as to how to make sure your pulleys are in line. And there we go, all fitted, all tensioned up. Really, really nice kit that actually. At first, I actually thought this this pulley here, the tensioner pulley, was a bit of a bad design on the back, because I was thinking, well, the eccentric is pushing against the nut, rather than it would be better if it was a little sleeve on the shaft that it was pushing against. But it turns out it's actually quite a good design, because on the eccentric it's got, you can just see there, I don't know if you can see on the video, it's got like flat sections on, so each time you turn it, it clicks into place on the nut, tensions it and holds it in place, so you can get it exactly where you want it. And then this centre cap here comes off, you put a star drive into the middle, tighten it up, and that's it. It's actually quite a nice design actually. So yeah, it's all bolted up, all tightened up, tensioned. Another little job out the way. I've also fitted the accelerator cable. It's obviously far too long. When I get the throttle bodies in a upcoming video, I will then obviously shorten that to make it a lovely, nice curve to where it needs to be. But for now, I'll just leave that as it is and probably move on to wiring now. So I mentioned before about showing you a little bit of detail about, or one of the ways that you can check that your pulleys are in a line. Now I generally do it by using a steel rule, and what you can do is you can basically sit the rule against the pulleys, and the gap, I should sit that flat there, the gap, there should be no gap rather either side on the pulleys, so it should sit flat on the 2 front faces of one pulley and flat on the 2 front faces of the other. And as long as the lip on the front of each pulley is similar, then you know that that belt is running true. Now you do the same for all pulleys, and it should be always the same. They should always be in line, which they are. This is obviously a fixed kit, so if they were out, it would be quite difficult to change, because it's been manufactured to be in a line. But it's just a check worth doing to make sure that your belt's running true, because if your belt's out by a couple of degrees, not only will it wear your belt out prematurely, but it'll tend to spit the belt off, and then that's obviously the last thing you want, because then you'll lose charging and you'll lose cooling. So it's just something worth looking at, I think. Right, first job of the day is the engine loom. This is an early engine loom, so it has a left-hand bulkhead connector and a right-hand bulkhead connector. This one here is the right hand, and there's one over, where's it gone? There's one over here, and that's the left-hand bulkhead connector. Now, as you can imagine, with it being an early loom, this is to run a dynamo, so there's a voltage stabilizer. So that's why I've marked up every cable, because I'm going to significantly alter this loom to incorporate an alternator rather than a dynamo. And it's also going to have additional cables running for stuff like the radiator fan, so that all needs loomed in. And I'm going to get rid of the left and right hand bulkhead connectors, because I just want it coming from the left hand on the passenger side. I want all the cables to come from the passenger side, so they're all to reroute. It'll all need stripped back, cleaned up, continuity checked, and then loomed in. As you've seen in an earlier episode, I used the fancy wrapping, and I often find with these looms that they were made to a budget, so the cables aren't exactly as long as they should be to reach where they're going. And I want to make it so that the cables are nicely tucked into corners, they come off at the right places, it looks really nice and neat. When I get that far in this episode, you'll see what I mean about that. I'm going to run it into all the corners of the chassis legs, etc. But this has all been marked up. It's took me probably about 2 hours to mark this up, I would say, something like that. And again, just using the diagram in the back of Haynes' manual. And as I said earlier, these do scare the life out of a lot of people, but when you get into it, they're really, really not difficult to follow at all. They all have numbers, as I mentioned previously. That refers to a table, tells you what each number is, and then you just follow the cable and the color number, the color code. So yeah, that's all marked up. I'm now going to start stripping it back and rerouting cables so that they go exactly where I want them. Because under the bonnet, I want it to look minimalistic. I don't want to see cables. I want them all tucked away neatly and just coming off at the right places. Like I say, I'll show you a bit more of that very shortly. Right, there's been a lot of hours gone into this. This being the engine bay loom, and I'll explain exactly what I've done with it and why it's took so long. So starting at this end, we now have a plug for an alternator. So I've removed all the cables that used to feed the old voltage regulator because we're no longer fitting a dynamo. So now we have the proper plug for a 70 amp alternator, and I've went overboard with cable sizes. I always go overboard with cable sizes because I'd rather cables were overrated than underrated for obvious reasons. I've seen cables on cars catch fire before, and that's the last thing you want. So yeah, alternator plug. I've got the cable there for the oil pressure switch that I've lengthened so it comes off at the right place for the ST block. Moving around, we have the cables here extended for the washer bottle, which I'm relocating, and the green cable there is for the horn. Again, I've got the cable here all cleaned up. All the contacts have been cleaned up. That's for the front, one of the front headlights and indicators. So then we come round again. There's the other one for, once you get it into the car, it's obvious which side's which, because obviously they are sided for the indicators. The green cable there is the indicator. Yeah, and then here we have the cables supplying the solenoid, sorry, for the starter motor. I've ran additional cables in, which I'll go into in a minute. Coming round again, the cables for the fuse box has been extended. That there'll be a fuse box for the lighting mounted under the dash on a bracket in an accessible area rather than under the bonnet, because as I've mentioned in the past, or as I've showed you in the past, the water rail fouls the original fuse box location, so I'm relocating that under the dash. The original plugs, because remember this is an early loom, have all been cleaned up. I've cleaned all the contacts up and cleaned all the plugs up, and we now have both plugs. So this is one of them here, that's the other one there, but they both come out on the same side of the loom now, so they'll connect under the dash. I'm going to make brackets to hold these plugs so they're not just floating in midair. They're going to go through a bracket as they would have done originally. They would have went through the bulkhead, but I'm going to make little brackets for them. So yeah, all the joints have been done in solder and heat shrink. Been quite a fair few joints, but that's my preferred method of joining. At the other end here, we've got the other end of the cable for the washer. Sorry, no, that's the supply end rather. This is front of the dash. This is the supply end for the washer, because this loom didn't have a washer bottle in it, because it would have had originally a little pump on the floor for your foot to basically pump the water through the windscreen jets. The red cable here, I said before I would explain about the additional cables that I've put in from the solenoid. This is going to be an additional auxiliary cable, and this supply cable here is capable of carrying 70 amp. So I'll show you a video at a later date of exactly what I'm doing with the wiring under the dash. I'm going to bring it right up to date. We're going to be having extra fuses because, as I mentioned in the past, these cars are very, very underfused, and I'm going to be putting fuses in a lot more circuits than there ever was to make it safer. We've got the big cable here. This is for the coolant fan. This will be mounted obviously on the radiator, and it'll go through a relay. So there's a temperature switch in the water rail which will operate the relay to bring in the fan as and when required. That cable is capable of taking 44 amps. Again, I've oversized it, but I'd rather oversize it. So that's now running as well. So yeah, like I said, there's about 10 hours gone into this loom, various nights, and just, you know, time here and there. I've just kept coming out and tinkering a bit more, making sure all the lengths are right. And I'm really, really pleased with that now. To be fair, I could have probably built a loom from scratch for the amount of work that's gone into it. But, you know, some of the plugs I wouldn't have had some of the plugs if I hadn't used the original loom. So that's now ready to get bolted into the car, or to get fed into the car rather. I've got a feeling it's maybe going to be a little bit of a nightmare, because these cables have got to be fed through holes in the bulkhead, etc. And if you imagine the width of this cable, which is well small enough to fit through the holes, but when you try to feed it through, if you add that plug, the width of that plug to the width of the cable as well, because you've got to feed the two fruit together, I've got a feeling I might have a bit of a fight with it. But I'll let you know how that goes, and I'll show you a little bit of detail, a little bit of footage when this loom's dressed in nicely and all the ends are connected up. I expected a fight today, and by God did I get one. It was a bit of a fight to get in, but now that it's in, I think that looks really, really good. Follows the contours of the bodies. I put a couple of P-clips here and there just to secure it. It's obviously grommeted where it comes through any steel work. We're coming off at the right points and connected to the solenoid. It runs along underneath the battery tray. There's the plug there for the front passenger side headlight. Through into the front panel, across the box section. We've got various cables coiled here for the radiator fan, the horn, and the washer jet bottle. And cables come through again through the grommet, another P-clip round to the plug on the back of the alternator, as you can just see there. And then I've got the cable coiled up there for the oil pressure switch. So that all sits in really, really nice. Much neater than they ever were, really. Now, I know they would have generally had a plug here. There would have been a round plug. And because I wanted to add additional cables in for bits and bobs, I knew that if I used the round plugs, I wouldn't have had enough cores. So that's why I've decided to do it the way I have. The plugs will be behind the dash. I haven't actually done anything with the wiring behind the dash yet. It's just coiled up in behind, because I've got quite a lot of work to do in behind the dash coming up. Extra fuse boxes, as I mentioned earlier, all to dress in. There's at least 3 days work, I would say, just in wiring under the dash, making brackets, etc. But I'll cover that on another episode, because I think I've done enough wiring for this one. But yeah, another step closer as well, another step closer to being able to crank it over, I suppose. So I'll leave that bit of wiring there now. I think that's enough for today. Well guys, it's not exactly the episode I had in mind, with parts that I ordered not coming, which can't be helped, I don't suppose, but I was hoping for this episode to be much more exciting than it's been. I understand wiring isn't necessarily everyone's cup of tea. It's car wiring can be a bit of a nightmare, it can be very boring as well. But we'll keep pushing on. We can't just stop because parts don't arrive. You've then got to try and find another direction to go in, unfortunately. So I am actually struggling a little bit with motivation at present myself. I've had one or two other YouTubers saying the same thing, and for me the most disappointing thing is we're seeing shows for the likes of May, June, July especially, being cancelled, and that absolutely baffles me, because they're saying by the end of May that they should have most of the, or pretty much all the over 50s vaccinated, which will, you know, put a lot less strain on the NHS, meaning there's no reason why an outdoor show in a big open space, in an open field, shouldn't be able to easily go ahead in July. I really don't understand why these shows are getting cancelled so early. It's far too premature for my liking, and it really is a massive kick in the teeth for people who just really need a big pick-me-up at the minute, because, you know, life at the minute isn't exactly how we would like it to be, and we're looking everywhere we can for anything to pick us up, and the shows is a massive one for me. It's a massive motivator for me, is a decent car show. So it's very disappointing, and I can't understand why these shows are being cancelled so early. I could understand it if it was an indoor show, you know, being in big indoor venue, but for an outdoor show in an open field, I'm flabbergasted. It makes no sense to me, and it really is a kick in the teeth, I think. But anyways, we've got to keep pushing it on. We can't just stop and think, you know, there's going to be no shows, so, you know, we haven't got, you know, any reason to have a target. We'll keep pushing on. We'll keep going at it. Thanks very much to a lot of the viewers as well, who pointed out that I could use foil on the inside of the reverse light. As soon as I read the first comment, I thought, what a brilliant idea that is, absolutely fantastic. It's something I hadn't thought about myself, so thanks very much to all the viewers who gave me that idea. I've actually done that now. I've bonded some foil onto the inside of the rear driver's side reverse light, so now it pretty much matches the passenger side one. So yeah, I'm going to leave this video here. As I said, it's not quite what I expected this episode, unfortunately, but I'm hoping the next episode will see some of the items featured that I wasn't able to feature in this one. So I'll see you very, very soon, guys. Thanks very much for watching, as always. I'll be back as soon as I can get some more parts and some more content together. Hopefully not too long. Thanks very much for watching, guys.